Hello, everybody. My name is Gilda Ross. I'm the Glenbard Student and Community Projects Coordinator. I am delighted that you could join us, and there's so many of us here to welcome Dr. Hallowell back to the Glenbard and GPS Parent Series. Ask of all of you that are listening across the street, across the country, to please share this resource. This is the 30th year of the Glenbard Parent Series, sharing information about the opportunities and the challenges of raising families today. We couldn't do it without the sponsors that make this all possible, and we especially couldn't do it without you and the gift of your time. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us at this very, very special event. I want to tell you very briefly about some of the upcoming events before we get started. This is a busy time of year for all of us, but I do hope you'll circle your calendar for some of the upcoming programs. Tomorrow, if you know someone who speaks Gujarati, we have a program at 7 p.m. about positive parenting. And then on Wednesday, we're going to welcome Mariana Gutierrez Perez Protsky, who will be speaking to families with young children on helping your child through the tantrums and the meltdowns that all children will experience. That's in Spanish only. It will be at noon and at 7 p.m. tomorrow. Jeff Salingo is back. He is always a popular speaker for GPS. His book is called Who Gets In and Why? A Year Inside College Admissions. That's on Tuesday, October 8th at noon and 7 p.m. Another returning speaker will be John Duffy, who will be with us on Tuesday, the 17th. This is a hybrid program. You can join us at noon, which will be virtual, or you can join us in person at 7 p.m. at the Glen Ellen Public Library. That program will, again, as all of ours, will again also have an option for a virtual viewing. So you'll want to hear Dr. Duffy talk about rescuing our sons, the crisis of disaffected youth. We're going to end, almost end October. One more will follow, Laura Kohler. Laura Kohler will be talking about school anxiety, school refusal. That will be on the 22nd. Again, noon will be virtual only at 7 p.m. You have a choice, hybrid, or join us in person in Naperville at their public library. Lots to choose from. The last program of the month is How Not to Raise an Asshole. And we'll tell you about that next time. So we're going to get right into it. So be thinking, please, about your questions and enter them in the Q&A in the chat. And Tina and Jericho will be moderating them. It's my honor now to introduce Tina Saviano. She is Assistant Director for Student Services for Special Education for the Glenbard Schools. She will do the introduction. Take it away, Tina.
Thank you, Gilda. Well, I am so super excited to have you guys all here and to introduce Dr. Edward Hallowell. He's a board-certified child and adult psychiatrist and world authority on ADHD. He's a graduate of Harvard College and Tulane Medical School and was a Harvard Medical School faculty member for 21 years. He is the founder of the Hallowell ADHD Centers in Boston, Metro West, New York City, San Francisco, Palo Alto, and Seattle. He has spent the past 4 decades helping thousands of adults and children who live with ADHD and has done a great job sharing his strength-based approach to neurodiversity, as well as he has ADHD and dyslexia himself. Dr. Hallowell is a New York Times bestselling author. He has written 20 books on multiple psychological topics. The groundbreaking Distraction series, which began with Driven to Distraction. He co-authored with Dr. John Ratey in 1994, A Revolution in Understanding ADHD. That's actually when I was in school learning to be a special education teacher. So thank you for all your hard work. And lastly, I just want to add to Dr. Hallowell has been featured on numerous different events and talk shows, things like that. So please Google some of them. They are very interesting and fascinating just to hear how things have changed over time. 2020s, 60 Minutes, Oprah, PBS, CNN, The Today Show, Dateline, Good Morning America, The New York Times, USA Today, Newsweek, Time Magazine, Los Angeles Times, Boston Globe, and many, many more. We are extremely delighted to welcome you back to the GPS series here today. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. What a wonderful organization you all have. You're very lucky to have this out there. You know, it's not everywhere around the country can you get such timely, passionately delivered, well-educated information. But was I clear? Is the final talk how not to raise an asshole?
Yeah.
Did
Did you love it?
Did I hear that right? That's
You
wonderful.
did. Join us. I'll
That's
send you a link.
wonderful. That is wonderful. I mean, if only every parent would read that book and do what it says. There are too many assholes out there. I think if they had different parents, then maybe they wouldn't. Because I don't think there's an asshole gene. I mean, there is. I think it's something you have to be taught and encouraged to develop. So that's wonderful. I wish I could come to that. I can't compete with that title, but I'll do my best here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save to the end the new developments. There are only two that I want to stress, but I think I really owe it to you to give some historical perspective, because most people don't really have that. You know, it begins with what people usually say: when did ADD come into existence? You know, what is this new condition? Was it invented? Was it, you know, was it discovered? How did it come about? Well, the fact of the matter is, ADHD is just a shorthand for a collection of symptoms, a collection of behaviors, a collection of ways of being in the world. And that's what I think of it as, a way of being in the world. And it's always been with us for as long as there have been humans. So it's as old as the hills, literally. There have always been children and adults who were particularly inattentive, disruptive, trouble sweating the details, but also the positive side: creative, original, imaginative. Whoever invented the wheel definitely had this condition. So it goes back at least as far as that. Then the whole field of mental health went through some real dark ages, where any problem related to learning, emotion, or behavior was considered to be entirely voluntary. So it was all of mental health, all of mental phenomena were under the rule of the will. You know, and it goes back to the story of Adam and Eve and the man's fall, and so on and so forth. So religion crept its way into the mix. So if you were someone, and this is, in fact, to this day, some people believe this: if you were depressed, the treatment was to cheer up. If you were anxious, the treatment was to get a grip. And if you couldn't follow the rules, well, you got punished, and often physically punished if you were a child. So, and that was what you needed. You know, there were well-meaning parents who were beating their children because that was the right thing to do. I mean, flagrant, horrific child abuse committed in the name of God. And I say that as a practicing Episcopalian, you know, it means a lot to me. But the horrors that have been committed in the name of God, you know, make you want to hand in your union card, you know, when it comes to religion. I've not done that. I still love God, but I hate what's been done in the name of God. So we were in need of reform, and it began to come in the 20th century, when finally biology began to usurp the rule of law that the belief and superstition had over our understanding of behavior, emotion, and learning. And in 1937, most people don't realize how recent, how long ago it is, something remarkable happened that really gave us a strong scientific foothold in the point of view that says this is not the result of willpower, that it's the working of biology, at least in part. And what happened was, in Providence, Rhode Island, a Dr. Bradley had a ward full of out of control boys. They were all boys. And if it hadn't been for Bradley putting them up on his ward, they would have been in reform schools, which is a euphemism for torture chambers. But Bradley, a very enlightened, humane man, was trying everything he could think of: behavioral interventions, changing the lighting, changing the way they were dressed, changing the way the staff was dressed, changing the sleeping hours, the diet, all the things we talk about to this day. Bradley was trying to manipulate, and nothing was working terribly well. until one day he read an article about the use of amphetamine in medicine, speed, you know. And he had the bright idea, why don't I try this on my hyperactive boys? Well, his head nurse must have thought he'd gone around the bend. You know, he comes into work one day and says, let's give these boys speed. and the head nurse, after she recovered her senses, probably said, you're out of your mind, Bradley. But he said, well, let's give it a try. Well, they gave them amphetamine, and in 20 minutes, they were able to sit down and cooperate over meals and do the thing they hated to do most, which was memorize their math facts. They only hated it because they couldn't do it. Now that they could do it because of the amphetamine, they loved it. And they called it their arithmetic pill. So far from not wanting to learn, they were avid learners. They just couldn't do it. It was like, you know, being nearsighted and needing eyeglasses. They couldn't see the board. They couldn't. Well, given the amphetamine, they could. And so this was a big deal because you saw a medical intervention, a pharmacological intervention succeeding where thousands of years of beatings and torture had failed miserably. In fact, obviously made matters worse. Well, that was a big deal, not only in our understanding of this condition, but in our understanding of the mind in general. And it started to push aside the tyranny of this moral, what I call the moral/religious model, that everything you do is the result of free will, and you're not trying hard enough if you're doing things that you shouldn't be doing. Well, so that picked up speed, and the movement continued right along up until the beginning of this century. There's some landmark events in the 1970s. We began to realize that this condition could last for the rest of your life, and that also girls could have it. So it wasn't just a matter of out of control boys. It was a matter of, but the kind of version the girls had was different. It was not hyperactive. It was not disruptive. It was the quiet daydreamer who sits in the back of the room, quietly twisting her hair and her finger. You have to ask her, what's it like to be in the classroom? She'll say, oh, it's fine. I'm almost never there. So she was in her own way hyperactive, but it was a hyperactive brain, not hyperactive motoric movements. The girls to this day don't get diagnosed because they're not disruptive. The biggest undiagnosed group are adult women, and it's just a shame because if they go for help, almost invariably they'll be diagnosed with depression and anxiety and put on an SSRI, which is not what they need. Yes, they do show signs of depression and anxiety because untreated ADD is depressing, you're underachieving, and anxiety making, you never know when you're going to screw up next. So you're walking around feeling anxious and feeling down in the dumps because you know you're underachieving, but treatment for depression will not help you. What you need is treatment for your runaway brain, which is how I describe ADD. It's you've got a Ferrari engine for a brain with bicycle brakes. So it's like a runaway brain. And what you need are some brakes to help control this tremendous power of your brain. Well, so then we realized that girls could have it, that adults could have it. And then in the 1990s, I don't have time to go through it all, but we really gave this condition its scientific underpinnings. Some major brain scan studies were done that show there is an anatomical and metabolic difference between the ADD brain and the non-ADD brain. Now, none of these can be used as diagnostic tests, but they were strong enough to show a legitimate difference based on biology and not just anatomy and metabolism, but genetics as well. This is a highly heritable condition. And so there you have this raft of evidence that was opened a whole new era in our understanding. Unfortunately, it still hasn't put the moral model to rout. There are still schools in this country where these kids are spanked and put in a corner, and one place where they're handcuffed to their desk. I mean, horrible treatment today, done in the name of discipline and good training, and sadistic, horrible, counterproductive treatment. I'll tell you one quick story. Most of you have probably heard of Captain Underpants. And that series has sold 200 million copies. And as an author myself, I can tell you 200 million is a huge number of books to sell. The author of that series, Dave Pilkey, has both ADD and dyslexia himself. He doesn't have any children, but we've become friends. He said, well, I've got 200 million children. So he and his lovely wife, who's Japanese, they live in Seattle and go back and forth with Japan. He was horribly abused in school. He went to a Lutheran school in the Midwest where they thought that any sort of behavior that was not recommended or prescribed was due to your being bad. And the treatment for bad was you had to get hit on your butt with a board. And so he would be beaten regularly, starting in first grade all the way through 12th grade. They abused him, and there's no other way to use. And they thought they were doing it in the name of God, in the name of what he needed. And what's amazing to me, here is this fellow getting beaten every day because he committed the sin of making people laugh and drawing cartoons. And they didn't beat it out of him, which is typical of ADD. He continued to draw his cartoons and make people laugh and receive his beatings. Well, he certainly had the last laugh. He went on to become one of the world's greatest ever author of children's books and captivated the imagination of these kids. And some of the characters in his are named. There's one called how did he phrase it? It's something about ADHD, and Pilkey himself has both ADHD and dyslexia, as do I. I tell that story just to illustrate how absolute genius you can be and yet be horribly abused and misunderstood. And that's been the plight of millions of children and adults throughout human history. Thank God, the God I believe in is rescuing children and adults from this horrible dungeon that they were put in, leading to deaths and just miserable lives. Well, so what allowed for this emptying of the dungeons? What allowed for this this awakening, this reformation, if you will? The door was opened by science. It was opened really by Dr. Bradley, showing that a medication could make a difference that beatings couldn't make. And then it was continued, the brain science continued to reinforce that, to bringing us to where we are today, where ADHD is a diagnosis made at all ages. Really, the earliest is usually about 4 or 5, up until you die. I mean, the oldest patient I ever had was 86, and the treatment allowed him to write the book he'd wanted to write his whole life long. So any age, both sexes, and by the treatment, I mean a combination. It always starts with education. You have to dispel the myths. And one of the myths is established by the name itself, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. That is a mouthful of gobbledygook. It's an insulting term, it's a demeaning term, and it is wrong. Worst of all, it's inaccurate. We, as speaking as one who has the condition, I don't have a deficit of attention at all. If I did, it would be a form of dementia. And all appearances of the contrary notwithstanding, I'm not demented. What I have, and what we ADHD types have, is an abundance of attention, not a deficit, an abundance. And our challenge is to control it. That's where we need help, not in manufacturing attention, but controlling the wild amount of attention we have. And you see, and that melee, that wild mixture is what's so wonderful and so bedeviling about this condition. On the one hand, we're gifted. On the other hand, we're retarded. On the one hand, we're brilliant. On the other hand, we're the opposite of brilliant. And people try to put us into one or the other. Neither one is accurate. People, I often talk about ADD as a potential gift, the key word being potential. The gift doesn't unwrap itself. left untended to, that's the prison population. People with undiagnosed ADD, untreated ADD, that's the prison population, the addicted population, the unemployed, the marginalized, the depressed, the suicidal, you name the bad outcome, the multiply divorced, you name the bad outcome. It's overly represented among people who have ADHD, so-called ADHD. But so are the halls of the CEOs and the Nobel Prize winners and the Pulitzer Prize winners and the best teacher of the year and the best CEO of the year. You name the field, and I can name you someone at the very top of it who has this condition. So my job and your job and our job is to maximize the upside of it, to unwrap the gift, as I like to say, and minimize the damage done by the very real downside. You know, another way I describe it is you've got a Ferrari engine if you have ADD, so you've got a powerful brain, but you have bicycle brakes. So you've got this Ferrari running around all over the place that's out of control, can't be controlled. So what I am is I'm a brake specialist. And once you strengthen the brakes, then you're able to win races. But until then, you're spinning out on curbs. You know, you're in trouble. You're in disciplinary trouble. You're, pardon my Dunkin' Donuts here, but you're accused until people understand it, that you're lazy, that you're not motivated, and that just compounds the problem. Because the real disabilities are shame and fear. Those are what ruin you for life. If you go through life thinking you're defective and you're stupid and you're lazy and you're a bum, sooner or later you're going to say, okay, that's me, and you're going to give up and you turn to drugs and crime and who gives a darn kind of thing. And it's a preventable problem, and that's where education is so important, and what you all are getting is so important, because it's counterintuitive. When someone first hears about ADHD, it sounds like a lame excuse, some way of getting out of doing your homework, invented by indulgent parents. Well, we now know medically that's simply wrong. That's just ignorant, and someone who clutches to that idea, it just infuriates me, because that's active ignorance. Now, we live in a country right now that is half in love with active ignorance. So, you know, ignorance is having its day. You know, there's a lot of praise for ignorance in the country today. And I just think, you know, the damage that ignorance in action does is manifest, and nowhere more obvious than in these children who were misunderstood and treated as disciplinary problems and beaten and maimed, who in fact have a treatable condition that with knowledge these kids can be turned into some of the most productive people we've got. The man who invented the polymerase chain reaction, for example, which is what we use for DNA testing, biggest advance in biology in the past 50 years, next to the double helix. He won the Nobel Prize in chemistry for that. And he has flagrant ADD. You know, I still call it ADD because that's what it was called when I learned about it in 1981. Then they stuck the H in the 90s just to confuse people. People always say, what's the difference between ADD and ADHD? Technically, there is no such thing anymore as ADD. It's all ADHD. If you're not hyperactive, as women and girls tend to be, then it's called ADHD without the H. Now, what sense does that make? Well, that's what people who make up names do. Anyway, we're at a place now where we are able to identify it if we will apply the science and knowledge that we've got. And so the diagnosis begins the treatment, and it's really good news. The day you get diagnosed with ADD, your life will improve. I tell people who come to see me, you will get better, guaranteed. How much better, I can't tell you, but there will be some modicum of improvement in your life just by having this diagnosis, just by knowing that you're not a loser, you're not lazy, you're not wayward, you don't have a moral infirmity, that you are gifted in ways that, you know, take some work to unwrap the gift, but far from being a moral, you know, corrupt person. The opposite is true. And these folks tend to be not only brilliant and creative and imaginative, we tend to be big-hearted, generous, kind, giving, easy to take advantage of. I'm a babe in the woods. I've been taken advantage of so many times. I just am trusting. It's just my nature, and that's typical of us. So what we need is teachers and doctors and parents and a world that understands us, so we can become the major contributors to civilization that we have it in us to be. And that's not blowing smoke. That's the absolute truth. I could fill many buildings over and over again with mega contributors who have this condition. Unfortunately, you can also fill the prisons of people who have this condition, who were not understood, not diagnosed, who were beaten and punished instead, or they turned to drugs instead. And so it is a matter of extreme importance that you not buy into ignorance when it comes to this. Otherwise, your children will perish. They won't just fall by the wayside. They will suffer terribly, and not become the Nobel Prize winners they otherwise might become. It's very much a two-way. It's very much a high stakes game of poker here. Now, beyond education and learning what it is, what does the treatment include? You need some lifestyle rearranging, and that I call coaching. You need to develop new habits so you don't always leave your homework at home, or you don't always show up late, or you don't always forget to pick the towel up off the bathroom floor, or you don't always leave the cupboards open in the kitchen, or you don't always leave your empty glass next to the TV. Parents who think these kids are doing it on purpose, they're not doing it on purpose. They just don't see the open cupboard. They literally don't see it. It's like the adults who they're dangerous drivers because they see the stop sign. It registers on their occipital cortex, but they don't comprehend the stop sign. They don't turn the sign into the command to stop. So they drive right through it. And, that's kind of dangerous. And so that's why we have like 8 times more car accidents, the ADD folks, than the general population. So it's life and death in some of these instances. So you need coaching to learn new habits if you can. And then to make you able to learn the new habits, medication can be a godsend. Now, medication is not necessary, but when it works, it is as effective as eyeglasses. Put it like that. It should change you as much as, but no more than, eyeglasses. It doesn't take away your creativity. It doesn't take away your special sauce. It doesn't do anything negative other than help you focus. Now, there are some side effects, but they're easily controlled by lowering the dose or changing the medication. The one that's most common is it suppresses your appetite. But as long as you keep eating and don't lose weight, no problem with that. People also worry about the stimulant medication being addictive. They're not at all addictive as long as you don't take them in mega doses. And you can tell if someone is developing a drug habit on stimulants. In my practice, it literally never happens, but it does happen sometimes. And just as long as you're followed by a professional who knows what he or she is doing, these meds are among the safest we've got. And the side effects people should really worry about are the side effects of not taking. Year after year of frustration and failure and underachievement, and your self-esteem is worn down and down and down and down. And by the time you hit high school, you're in the basement of self-esteem. And that is just no way to start off your adult life, thinking you're a total loser, which is what so many of these kids do. And then we wonder, why do they turn to drugs? Well, it's the only way they can get any pleasure, any sense of reward. They feel disconnected. And, this raft of school shootings, I trace it directly back to disconnection. And, I won't get off onto that too much, but people with undiagnosed, untreated ADD are ripe for feeling disconnected, which leads you to feel depressed or violent or angry or all of the above. So consider a trial of medication and coaching. So the 3 elements you really should have are education, consideration of medication, and coaching, lifestyle change. Now, there are several other things you can do, many other things, and one of them was pioneered in Napierville, where my friend John Ratey did his research and proved that physical exercise is as good a treatment for ADD as you can possibly find. And he proved it by the students in Napierville High School starting their day off with 20 minutes of exercise. And their SAT scores shot up, the best in the district. And people wondered why, and it was just that they were getting this regular exercise, physical exercise. And John also recommends, that you have brain breaks during the class. Hopefully, don't sit in rows and chairs. This is not good for you. You're meant to stand up and move around if you possibly can. And just showing that movement and exercise improved test scores, improved happiness scores, if you will. The school was no longer a prison. It was a place where you could discover and grow. And that's what education should be. It should be a place where you play. And my definition of play is any activity in which your imagination gets involved. Anytime your imagination kicks in, by my definition, you're at play. The opposite of play is robotic behavior, doing exactly what you're told. Well, computers can do that. We don't need that anymore. AI can do that. What we need now are people who can invent and create and discover. And that's what education should be. And by that, I call that play. And the educational system that comes closest to that is the Montessori system, where you're guided by your curiosity. For people with ADD, Montessori sometimes isn't as good because they need a little bit more structure than that. But if you want a system that really does proceed on curiosity, it's Montessori. Now, the two new developments I want to mention, one is the discovery of the role of balance in treating ADD. Now, balance is largely controlled by a part of your brain, the base and the back, called the cerebellum. When I was in medical school, it was an afterthought. Well, now, thanks to the work of Jeremy Schmallman at Harvard and others, we now know that the cerebellum is intimately involved in higher cortical functions, specifically behavioral control and cognition, thinking, attention, all of that. The cerebellum plays a role in. And what the interesting discovery is, by stimulating the cerebellum, challenging the cerebellum with balancing exercises, because that's the primary role of the cerebellum, is to control balance, by giving people of all ages exercises to do that challenge balance, if you do them 15 minutes a day for 3 months, you'll get improvement, but you have to do them every day. Otherwise, you won't get the benefit. It sounds impossible, doesn't it? What balancing exercises are going to make me be on time? They're going to make me remember better. They're going to make me less impulsive. The answer is yes, 80% of the time. I proved this to myself memorably. Some years ago, I went to Shanghai and gave a lecture. And at the end, this mom came up to me. These Chinese moms are very persistent. She said, "You got to treat my son," in translated Chinese. And I said, "But I live 7,000 miles away. How am I going to do that?" She said, "Don't worry, I'll translate. And we don't want to use medication anyway, so you got to take it." So I said, "Okay, I'll give it a shot. I'm always up for a challenge." And lo and behold, this little boy, his name was Boots, English name was Boots. And at the time, he was 10 years old, and he was at the bottom of his class in every way. He was at the bottom in grades, at the bottom in behavior. He was getting in trouble all the time. And it was an embarrassment to his family, which in China is not a good thing here either, but particularly not so in China. And so what did we do? Well, first of all, I told the school and the parents to stop shaming him and hitting him with a stick. And to my amazement, they agreed. They said, "Okay, if that's bad for him, we won't do it." And I said, "And furthermore, make him feel loved." Emotion is the on-off switch for learning. And if you can help a child to feel safe and unafraid, they'll learn a lot better. So the best way to do that is to make that child feel welcomed and loved. And so the mom particularly led the way on that. And then give him a way of understanding why he does what he does, because he knows it's disruptive. Give him the model of the race car brain with bicycle brakes. Well, Boots understood that immediately, and he started talking about, I got to put a strengthen my brakes, and I got to strengthen my, and he was off to the races. Just that analogy. And then we're not going to use medication. We used balancing exercises. And I told Mom what equipment to get a, a exercise ball that you sit on, get a wobble board that you stand on one leg, then stand on one leg with your eyes closed. There's a whole series of exercises you do that challenges balance. And lo and behold, so that was the whole treatment plan, a cocoon of love, and in getting Boots to understand race car brain with bicycle brakes, and then do the exercises. By Christmas, starting in September, by Christmas, 0 problems with discipline and #1 in the class academically. That just took my breath away, because to see that dramatic a change in that short of a time, no medication, just the change in the love envelope and the understanding envelope, and then the stimulation of the cerebellum through physical exercise, creating that dramatic of a change. That's new. And if you want to read more about it, it's in my book 2.0, ADHD 2.0. It's chapter 3. I think it's the most exciting new non-medication treatment we've got. And then the other new development I wanted to tell you about. How am I for time? Are we doing okay? Okay, good. The other new development is one of the problems for teens and adults with ADD is we have a terrible tendency to brood and ruminate. We have a terrible tendency to go into these dark moments. These dark can last for, hours, a day, even a week. But what we do is we go over and over and over the same negative. How could that person have said that to me? How could that person have done that? How could I be so misunderstood? That teacher is such an asshole. That parent is such a doofus. How could that girl have rejected me? How could that boy have stood me up? And it's not just adolescents, it's adults too, the same things. They take some perceived rejection and perseverate on it and ruminate on it and go over and over and over. Why do they do that? It's so counterproductive. Well, we know why. Thanks to fMRI, where you can see the brain in action. There's no psychodynamic reason for doing it. It's really the biology. People with ADD, what we hate more than anything else is lack of stimulation. Lack of stimulation, boredom, is our kryptonite. We can't tolerate it. We just can't tolerate it. So what rumination does is it gives you something to focus on. Pain is the most focusing stimulus we've got. It's unpleasant, but it's very stimulating. If someone is slapping you around, you pay attention because it hurts. Well, this is the mental equivalent of physical pain, and you do it to yourself. So you find this thing, okay, and you jab it into your brain like a hot poker, and you just circle around it over and over and over again. It's focused by the pain. The gain you get is focus. It's not worth the price you pay by any means, but your mind wants that focus. So the treatment is not medication. Medication won't touch it. You have to learn how to redirect your attention. And if you can, and by the way, this is called, when this happens, it's called the default mode network. And you can see it on fMRI. The default mode network takes over. And what you got to do is get yourself off that track, out of the default mode network. It's hard to do because the default mode network is very sticky. So what you have to do is come up with some form of stimulation that is equally potent as the pain you're feeling in the default mode network. And that's everybody, each to his own, whatever you find particularly stimulating. But it's got to be powerful enough to drag you out of, because the minute you deny the DMN, the default mode network, your attention, it goes dead. It can't survive a second without your attention. You feed it with your attention and it provides suffering and pain in exchange. Well, the minute you shift your attention to some other equally stimulating form of activity, the DMN shuts down and you're off to the races, being your your usual wonderful self. Now, what kind of stimulation works? For some people, very vigorous exercise. Go run as fast as you can for some people. For other people, loud music. It's going to be really loud. It's got to be really stimulating. For other people, getting into an argument, or having a political debate, or but not in a nasty way that's counterproductive, but in a way that's useful. Immersing yourself in some creative activity. For me, that would be writing. For someone else, it might be pottery. For someone else, it might be cooking. For someone else, it might be gardening. But it has to be creative and something you really like. So it's really important to develop those, by the way. Having a creative outlet is an important part of unwrapping your gift. And it's also a wonderful way of escaping the DMN. So those two new things, the role of the cerebellum in treating, if you will, or unwrapping the gift, and the role of the DMN and how to escape it, how to get out of rumination without medication at all, just learning how to do it. It's not easy to learn because your brain wants to go back to its comfortable place of being tortured. It seems odd we volunteer for torture, but we do, because it provides the secondary gain of focus. And that's what we crave. So you want to find other ways of getting the stimulation to provide the focus. Well, I think I've overstayed my welcome here, and
I'm watching the clock. I'm watching the clock. I'm going to get you out of here on time, but
Okay.
we're going to open this up now to some questions. And so I have a question. You talk about the coaching. And so people always come to GPS because they want to walk away with something. You've given us so much already, but tell me something, to help that child with, so what's the first coaching advice that you have for a teacher and for a parent in helping your child?
Well, a coach, and by the way, I made up this term in Driven to Distraction, and people in the field laughed at me and said, "Oh, Hallowell thinks they need a coach. I think they need a doctor, don't they?" Well, I said, "Well, they need a coach even more." And a coach does what a mom does minus the nag factor. So a coach reminds you, do you have your homework? Did you remember to bring home your book bag? Have you made that? Have you visited grandma? Have you written that thank you note? Have you put on your clothes? You tell someone they need to go up to your room and pick up your whatever, and they go up to the room, and by the time they get up there, they've forgotten what they went up there to get. So the coach monitors that and brush your teeth. Well, you can tell them to go brush their teeth, and they'll be lost in the bathroom for a half an hour, playing all kind of games. They're not being disobedient.
Right.
They just get caught up in their imaginary mishigas. It's not even mishigas. It's just very complex stuff that maybe will win them a Nobel Prize. But in the meantime, they don't get their teeth brushed or their bed made or out the door fully dressed. So that's what a coach does. A coach sees to it as best as possible that you do the things you need to do to, function in the world. And it really is a elaborate system of reminding and encouraging. People with ADD, for obvious reasons, live with a deficit of encouragement because they get so much correction. They get told so many times the problems they're going to have in life. They get told so many times that they're not all that bright, that they're not all that talented. And you hear that long enough and you believe it. And that's the self-fulfilling prophecy. And Carol Dweck has proven that the old line, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.
Yeah.
And it's high time that we start helping kids think they can as the default position. So for so many of these kids, the default position is I can't. And then that's the self-fulfilling prophecy. But if you get into the mindset that says I can, then guess what? You can. And it's really proof once again of the power of positive thinking. It becomes a cliche, but now we know it biologically. It's true. It works. But the other side works too, in its very destructive way. If you think you can't, you can't.
Right.
And so much of the work I do comes back to just that concept. And people will take you to task. I'll say, you're really smarter than you think you are. And they'll say, how do you know? because they're used to being lied to. They're used to being sold a bill of goods. And so I got to prove it when I say, well, I know from your vocabulary, I know from your ability to pick up subtleties of humor, I know from your remembering what you saw when you came in the room, I know by your remembering my name, I know by your ability to grasp abstractions and make it, even to, you're asking me that question proves how smart you are. And then they suddenly, you can feel the tension leave the room because finally they've been understood. And the older they get, the more they want to break down and cry because they've been so misunderstood for so long. And those tears are tears of wonder. They're wonderful tears because that then leads to growth and improvement and understanding. And these folks can make good on the promise they were born with. So that's what a coach. Now, coach doesn't do the whole story. Often you need medication to provide the eyeglasses, to provide the focus, and you need a team of people who believe in you instead of are there to punish you and heckle you and rain on your parade. You know, but, my friend John Croyle says, "Be a dream maker, not a dream breaker."
Yeah, that's
A
great.
lot of adults, in the name of being realistic, are dream breakers. And let a kid have unrealistic dreams. You know, whoever dreamt of most of the important discoveries are unrealistic. You know, I mean, you know, and also it's not just academic discoveries, but social. I mean, go out for the team you want to be on, try out for the play you want to be in, ask out the person you really want to go out with, not some backup, you know, settling for someone, you know, go for what you really want. The worst that'll happen is you won't get it and then you try again. You don't want to spend your life trying to, you know, settle for what you can get. You want to go for what, and once you've done that, like I did it in 12th grade, my English teacher in 12th grade challenged me to write a novel. And I thought, geez, I knew Exeter was a tough school. I didn't know I had to write a novel. And, but I was the only kid he challenged to do that. So I thought, well, I was kind of flattered. So I said, I'll give it a shot. And by the end of the year, I had written a novel and it won the senior English prize. But more than that, it got me to prove to myself I could do something I would have thought was flat out impossible. I would have thought it was difficult as learning to fly, you know, and yet I did it. And I where did that come from? I thought to myself, was that me? Well, I knew it was me, so I couldn't, you know, pretend it was someone else. And that, when that seeped in, it stayed with me ever since. I have this crazy belief that I can do things that are impossible, and I keep trying to do them. I fail most of the time, but now and then I strike gold. But what matters is not the success or the failure. What matters is that I'm in love with the process. I'm in love with the game. I got sold on the game back in 12th grade, and I've been playing it ever since. And it's the game of the impossible, the game of the difficult. That's where we do our best when we're engaged in what's difficult. We don't do well with easy shit, pardon my language. We don't do well with easy stuff. You know, we do well when it's difficult. And because we get focused on that.
Tina has a question.
Yes, so we have a number of questions coming through, so I want to make sure we have time to get some of those answered. So here's one of our first questions. How do you coach a 17-year-old with ADHD while also trying to gradually release responsibility and preparation for living in a dorm for college? This can be especially complicated for a parent with ADHD.
Well, you want to do it with a coach. You can't do it all yourself. So you hire a coach. I mean, there are coaches, you can go on Google. There's an academy, ADD Coach Academy, run by David Dwork. So these are professionally trained and licensed people. And you hire one of those folks to do the coaching, and then you as a parent can do the part that a parent does. Preparing your kid, by the way, is very smart for you to prepare. The transition from high school to college is a classic time for kids to crump and die. I mean, not die, but my nephew came back from his first semester at Emory with a grade point average of 0.00. Now that takes commitment to put up and it was because he just didn't go to any class. He was having too much fun. and he needed a coach, he needed a routine, he needed structure. And so you're very smart to train them during the summer before school. See, you're going from a place of maximum structure and supervision, namely living at home, to a place of almost no structure and supervision, namely living in college. And these kids are, it's like, you know, Ferris Bueller's Day Off. I can do whatever I want, sleep as late as I want, drink as much as I want, go out with whoever I want. I mean, I'm unsupervised and free. And a lot of colleges don't care, fine, get into trouble. The way to prevent that is to have a summer of learning how to get up on time, go to class on time, do homework on time, and then be accountable to someone. And the coach is not a taskmaster. The coach is someone you check in with. And you get to a point where you look forward to the check-in because you look forward to saying, I got it done. It's a moment of triumph. Do that before college and you'll save yourself all kinds of trouble.
Here's a question on your thoughts and the research associated with neurofeedback and ADHD.
Well, it's a great idea, and it makes tremendous common sense. The idea is that you can train your brain much as you train a muscle by challenging it and learning it and doing it over and over again. The problem is most of these systems have you play a game where you move a character around a screen simply by focusing, and it's pretty amazing. You can move something just by paying attention to it. But the problem is you get very good at playing the game, but it doesn't translate to the real world. It doesn't help you in the classroom. It doesn't help you remembering, to bring your book back. That's where these things fall down. I think there's great work to be done in the field of neurofeedback. I just don't think we're quite there yet.
You question, and I think you've answered this. What does the research say about the long-term effects of stimulant medication?
Well, it's been around since 1937. There's no reason to believe that there's any problem with it. And remember, the entire world is on stimulant medication. The entire world is caffeinated. And, there's no long-term effect on that. The one somewhat long-term effect is with stimulants, a tiny percentage of people will get a tiny amount of growth suppression if you take it during your years of growing. So if you want to squeeze every millimeter of growth that you can, the thing to do then is you don't have to not take stimulant medication, just don't take it during the summer. And during the summer, you'll have a compensatory spurt. But again, it's a tiny minority of people this happens to. But if you're someone who's avid about growth, and we'd all like to grow as tall as we can, then just don't take stimulant medication during the summer. That's the only long-term side effect we know about. On the other hand, we know a lot about the long-term side effects of not using medication, of long-term side effects of daily failure and frustration and being called out. Just think about it. Who can survive that? It's like slow motion trauma. It's like a slow motion train wreck. You're just every day you're colliding with defeat, and you're having to metabolize being scorned. It's so obvious that that's corrosive and bad for you. And yet, such is our fear and ignorance around medication, people don't want to try that. They'd rather settle for the corrosive effect of failure and underachievement.
What can you say about the new developments about ADHD and autism?
Well, it's very interesting. There's new research that I'm not conversant with, but we've always known there's an overlap there, and people with autism have a lot of the symptoms of ADD, and people with ADD have symptoms of autism. The real question is, what do you do about it? And by and large, with ADD, medication is way more effective than with autism, but there are meds that can help autism. They both rely heavily on training and social learning. And the prognosis, the prognosis for ADD is excellent. With autism, it's not quite as excellent, but it's still more promising than it used to be. Autism used to be everything got blamed on the mother. There was the refrigerator mother was the term, and the idea was that the mother was freezing the child out. And it's so wrong. I mean, and these poor mothers feeling guilty. It's bad enough to have a child who you can't relate to, who can't relate back. Now you have to blame yourself. I mean, that is just so wrong of my profession to do that. Same thing with schizophrenia, by the way. There was this notion of the schizophrenogenic mother. Mother had nothing to do with it. If anything, mother was trying to prevent, save the day. But now people other than me are doing really cutting edge research on the overlap between autism and ADHD.
Dr. Hallowell, thank you for this time. I want to let everybody know that on February 27th, virtually and in person, we'll be hosting Sarah Ward and Jessica Minahan, and you know them well. They're wonderful. I know they're colleagues of yours, and they talk about some of those specifics. It's just we're going to keep this conversation going. A final word to the teachers and the parents who are working with these kids. You want us to envelop them with love. What else do you want to say? Or maybe you just want to say that again.
Oh, love and knowledge, the knowledge, the applied knowledge, both. It begins with love as the driving force, but then don't stop there. There's a great saying, meet the person where they are, but don't leave them there. So meet them with love, but then bring in the knowledge, because it is the applied knowledge that will make a difference just as much as the love. Love alone is a wonderful tool, but it's not enough. I mean, as much as I think love is the answer, it's not enough. Love, but if you love someone, you want to learn what it takes to help that person. So love begets the pursuit of knowledge. And and it's a wonderful story compared to when I was a little boy, where it was smart and stupid and get punished. I mean, that was the whole ball of wax. Well, now we've got a much better ball of wax, and the hope is very real, and great outcomes happen every day. So just applying the knowledge we have and getting past the ignorance. I mean, there are people out there who actually say, I'd rather fail doing it my way than succeed with help.
Mm.
That's what we need to get past, because the joy of success and of making of yourself what you can is tremendous. And it's a shame to have some kind of stubborn belief that I'd rather do it my way get in your way.
It was an honor hosting you those many years ago, and an even greater honor today. Thank you so much, Dr. Hallowell. A pleasure. Thank you, Tina. Thank you, Jerka. Thank you, everybody, for listening in. Check out ADHD 2.0. Fabulous. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you.